The Coconut Grove at the Ambassador Hotel, Los Angeles. October 3rd, 1961. The room smelled like money and cigarettes, and a particular kind of desperation that only surfaces when people who've made it are trying to prove they still have it. Crystal chandeliers threw warm gold light across 600 faces. Studio executives, politicians, gamblers, gossip columnists, the kind of people who ate their steak and watched their entertainment and talk about both with equal indifference. But not tonight. Tonight, they were quiet, because Judy Garland was on that stage. She stood at a microphone and addressed the color of midnight blue, holding nothing but her voice and whatever iron courage lived in the small space behind her eyes. She had survived things that would have destroyed lesser people. The studios, the pills, the collapse, the comeback, the collapse again. She had built herself back up from rubble so many times that the rebuilding itself had become legendary. People came to see Judy Garland perform not just because she was talented, which she was beyond measure, but because watching her sing felt like watching someone refuse to drown. She was 3 songs into her set. The room was hers. Every eye locked. Every breath held. The kind of silence that an audience only gives when they've surrendered entirely to something they know they'll remember forever. That was when Richie Voss opened his mouth. Richie Voss was not a famous man. He was not a dangerous man. He was not a powerful man. He was something worse. He was a man who believed he was funnier than he was, and had surrounded himself with people willing to confirm it. He'd had a short run on a variety program that NBC had quietly canceled the previous spring. He'd done some club dates. He'd opened for people who were actually famous, and he'd mistaken proximity to talent for possession of it. He was 34 years old, red-faced, heavy around the jaw, with the kind of smile that preceded bad decisions. He'd been drinking since 6 o'clock. He was sitting at a table near the left edge of the stage with 4 other men who all shared his condition, loud, well-lubricated, and convinced that their presence in the room was a contribution to the evening rather than a threat to it. Judy was deep into her 3rd number, the kind of song that required absolute stillness from an audience, the kind of performance where a single cough felt intrusive, where a dropped glass would have been a desecration. Richie Voss leaned back in his chair, spread his arms wide in a gesture that was meant to look casual and landed somewhere between obnoxious and deliberately theatrical, and said, loudly, clearly, aimed directly at the stage, "Sing something from the old days, sweetheart, before you fell apart." The music didn't stop, but it flinched. The pianist's left hand hesitated by half a beat, recovered, kept going. Judy's eyes moved, just barely, just the pupils tracking toward the sound, and then moved back to the middle distance where performers go when they're trying to hold something together from the inside. She kept singing. She finished a note. She finished a phrase. She kept going because Judy Garland had spent 30 years learning how to keep going when the world handed her reasons to stop. But the room had changed. 600 people had felt the intrusion. The spell had been disturbed. Not broken entirely. Judy was too good for that. But cracked. You could feel the audience split into 2 halves. The half listening to the music and the half listening for what Richie Voss might say next. He didn't disappoint. Come on, do the rainbow thing. That's all anyone really wants. Someone at a nearby table told him to shut up. He laughed. His friends laughed. He raised his glass in a mock toast toward the stage and said something else, lower this time, but audible enough to the tables around him. Something about her weight. Something about her pills. Something that when it reached the ears of the people who heard it made their faces go tight with a specific discomfort of witnessing a cruelty too petty to be dramatic and too mean to be ignored. Judy's voice, to her eternal credit, did not waver. But backstage, something shifted. Dean Martin was watching from the wings. He had a glass of something amber in his hand that may or may not have had actual bourbon in it. The running joke among the Rat Pack was that half the time Dean's drink was iced tea and the whole drunk act was a performance. But his eyes were completely clear. They were always completely clear. That was the thing people who underestimated Dean Martin consistently got wrong. They saw the loosened tie and the lazy grin and the casual lean, and they thought they were looking at a man who wasn't paying attention. Dean was always paying attention. He'd been watching Richie Voss for 40 minutes. He'd clocked the drinking. He'd marked the posture. He'd recognized the particular physics of a man working himself toward a bad decision, the way you recognize the smell of a gas leak before you see the flame. He'd told himself to wait. That Judy could handle it. That professional performers handle hecklers all the time and don't need protecting. Then he heard the words about the rainbow. Then he heard the words about the pills. Dean Martin set down his glass with very deliberate care. He adjusted his jacket. He straightened his cuffs. He turned to the stagehand standing 2 feet away. A young kid named Arturo who'd been working the Grove for 3 years and would work it for 20 more. And he said, quietly and without any particular emotion in his voice, "Kill Voss's microphone." Arturo blinked. "Sir, the table mic by the left column. There's a feed from the room mics that goes back to the board. I want his table dead. Sound doesn't leave his immediate vicinity. Can you do that?" Arturo could do that. He did it in 90 seconds. Dean waited. Judy finished her 4th song to an ovation that was enormous and genuine and carried the extra charge that audiences give when they're trying to compensate for something ugly that happened in the room. She was gracious about it. She smiled. She thanked the band by name, which she always did, because she understood that talent was a collective endeavor and not a solo achievement. Richie Voss, emboldened by the drinks and by the fact that nothing bad had happened to him yet, stood up. He raised his glass toward the stage. He said, or tried to say, loudly and theatrically, something he clearly imagined would get a laugh from his table and perhaps ripple outward into the room. Something at Judy's expense. Something he'd probably rehearsed in his head a dozen times over the last hour and now believed was his moment to deliver. His words went approximately 4 feet. The room, enormous and acoustically live, absorbed them completely. The chatter, the music from the band transitioning between songs, the clink of glasses and the rustle of a room full of people. It swallowed Richie Voss whole. His friends looked at him. He looked at his friends. He said it again, louder. Same result. At nearby tables, people glanced over, not because they'd heard him, because they could see his mouth moving and see his grand gesture and see the total failure of the moment to land the way he'd intended. He looked, in that moment, like exactly what he was, a man performing for an audience that had not agreed to watch him. Then Dean Martin walked onto stage. He didn't rush. Dean Martin never rushed. Rushing implied that something had gotten away from you, that the situation had momentum you were trying to catch. Dean moved like a man who decided the pace of everything in the room the moment he walked into it. He shook Judy's hand, kissed her cheek, said something in her ear that made her laugh. Actually laugh, not perform a laugh, but get surprised into one. Then he turned to face the room with the kind of relaxed authority that couldn't be manufactured and couldn't be borrowed. It either lived in a person or it didn't. In Dean Martin, it lived. "Good evening," he said into the microphone. "I wasn't planning to come out here tonight. I was comfortable backstage. They've got better cheese back there than they serve at the tables. Incidentally, you're overpaying." Light laughter, easy laughter, the room breathing. I came out because I wanted to personally introduce the next segment of Judy's show. But before I do that, I want to address something. The room got quiet, not nervous quiet, attentive quiet. Dean turned slightly and looked, without any particular aggression, toward the left edge of the room, toward Richie Voss's table. "There's a gentleman over here," Dean said, still completely calm, "who's been contributing his own commentary to tonight's performance. Now, I believe in artistic freedom. I believe in self-expression. I believe every man has the right to his opinion." He paused. "I do not believe every man has the right to share that opinion during Judy Garland's show." 600 people turned to look at Richie Voss. 600 people at once. Voss had the particular expression of a man who'd expected audience participation and received something that felt considerably more like a tribunal. "Here's what I know about the gentleman at that table," Dean continued, and his voice was warm, genuinely warm, not cold or contemptuous, which made it somehow more devastating. "He's been in the business. I'm told he had a show for a little while. NBC, was it? NBC. Dean nodded slowly. Tough network. Tough crowd. Another pause. Apparently tougher than he thought. The laugh that came from the room was quiet and specific and had edges. Voss stood up. This was his mistake. Standing up confirmed that he was the person being discussed. Sitting down might have preserved some ambiguity. Standing up put him in the light. "Hey, Dean," he said, and his voice had that particular quality of man trying to sound like he's in on the joke when he knows he isn't. "I'm a comedian. I'm just trying to keep things loose." "I know," Dean said pleasantly. "That's the problem." He let that sit. "Judy Garland," Dean said, turning back to the room, "has worked for 30 years. She has survived things professionally that most people in this business wouldn't survive personally. She is here tonight on this stage, giving every single person in this room everything she has. And what she has is more than most people on this planet will ever possess." He paused again. "She doesn't need help staying loose. She needs the room to meet her where she is, which is at a level that, frankly, some of us can only see from very far below." He wasn't looking at Voss when he said it. He didn't need to. "Sir," Dean said, and now he was looking at him. "What's your name?" "Richie Voss." "Richie." Dean nodded. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. What you said earlier, the things you said about Judy during her performance, the comment about her." He paused, chose a word carefully. "Her past. Did you say those things to be funny?" Voss looked around his table. His friends were not meeting his eyes. "It was just a joke, Dean." "Was it funny?" Silence. "Richie, was it funny?" Voss shifted. "I mean, 600 people in this room." Dean said, "I can see all of them from here. You want me to take a poll?" He gestured toward the crowd. "Anyone here find the comments funny?" Nothing. Not silence as in restraint. Silence as in no one thought it was funny. "Here's the thing, Richie," Dean said. "Comedy is generous work. The best comedians, and I've known quite a few, they're generous. They're looking to give the audience something. A release, a moment of connection, a feeling of being in on something together." He tilted his head. "What you were doing wasn't generous. It was the opposite of generous. You were trying to take something from this room, from this show, from this woman, so you could feel larger. You understand the difference." Voss said nothing. "I'm going to give you an opportunity," Dean said. "Right now, in front of everyone." The room had stopped breathing. Even the waiters had stopped moving. There's a specific quality of stillness that descends over a room when something real is happening. Not performed, not theatrical, but genuinely real. And this was that quality. "The Ambassador Hotel," Dean said, "employs a staff of dedicated people who work very hard to keep this place functioning. The kitchens, the floors, the facilities." He gestured vaguely downward. "The facilities in particular require regular attention. It's unglamorous work. Important work, but unglamorous." He looked at Voss. "I've spoken with a hotel manager, who, incidentally, is a personal friend. I've spoken with him, and I've made him an unusual request." Voss stared. "He's agreed," Dean continued, "to allow you, Richie Voss, to spend the next 45 minutes cleaning the men's restrooms on this floor. All 3 of them, supervised, with an audience of exactly 1. The head of maintenance, a man named Gerald who has been with this hotel for 16 years and who, I'm told, runs a very tight operation." The room erupted, not in anger, in the kind of shocked, helpless laughter that comes when something happens that no one anticipated, and the absurdity and the justice of it land simultaneously. Voss's face cycled through approximately 5 emotional states in 4 seconds. You're joking," he said. "Richie," Dean said gently, "when I'm joking, people laugh. What you're hearing right now is people recognizing consequences. You can't make me—" "I can't make you do anything," Dean agreed. "You're a free man. You can stand up, walk out, and drive home. Your name will be in 4 gossip columns by Friday morning, and the story will follow you for a while, but you are absolutely free to leave." He paused. "Or you can spend 45 minutes doing something that requires actual humility, and when you come back into this room, you'll have earned the right to watch the rest of Judy's show from the back. Your choice. Completely." He said it like he already knew what Voss would choose. He was right. What happened next passed into legend the way all great stories do, through the mouths of witnesses who couldn't stop telling it. Richie Voss walked out of the main room, of the Coconut Grove. He walked through a service corridor with Gerald, the maintenance supervisor, who had indeed been briefed and who had indeed set out the appropriate equipment. He spent 43 minutes doing exactly what Dean Martin had described. Meanwhile, on the stage of the Coconut Grove, Dean Martin introduced the second half of Judy Garland's performance. He said 4 sentences about her. Then he stepped back. Then Judy sang. What Judy Garland did in that second half of the show, the accounts differ on the details, but agree on the substance. She was incandescent. The disruption had been processed and alchemized into fuel. Every performer carries reserves that only get tapped under pressure, and Judy's reserves were immense. She reached into them, and she gave everything she found there to 600 people who sat in total silence and received it and were changed by it. When she finished, they stood. They stood before the last note fully resolved. They stood the way people stand when they're not performing appreciation, but genuinely overcome by it. 3 people were crying. Then 6. Then more than anyone was counting. Dean found Judy in her dressing room after. She was sitting in front of a mirror, still in her performance dress, carefully removing an earring with a particular focused attention of someone whose hands need something to do. "Dean," she said to his reflection. "Judy." She set the earring down. She turned to look at him directly. "The toilet thing," she said. "Yes. Did you actually plan that before the show, or did you come up with it in the moment?" Dean sat down in a chair across from her. He picked up a glass of water from the dressing table and took a sip. He considered the question with what appeared to be genuine seriousness. "I had a sense of the evening," he said. "Dean." There was some prearrangement involved, he admitted. The sound cut, certainly. Gerald was a convenience. But when I knew it was going to happen, that wasn't before the show. She looked at him for a long moment. "You were watching." "I was watching." She turned back to the mirror. She was quiet for a while. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, but full. "I've been dealing with that my whole career," she said. "People who think they have the right to say things. To me, about me, during." She paused. "You develop a skin. You learn to keep going. You tell yourself it doesn't reach you, and after a while you almost believe it." "It reached you tonight," Dean said, not as an accusation, as an acknowledgement. "It always reaches me," Judy said. "I've just gotten very good at not showing it in my face." She met his eyes in the mirror. "I don't know whether to thank you or tell you I didn't need it." "Both are true," Dean said. She almost smiled. "The thing about the rainbow," she said. That specifically, the way he said it. She shook her head. "People use that song like it's a leash. Like they can call me back to being 12 years old and small and desperate to be liked. Like the song is a collar and they're holding the end of it." She paused. "That song is mine. It came out of me. I gave it everything. And then the world took it and turned it into a punchline at my expense." Dean said nothing. He understood that she wasn't asking for a response. "When you walked out there," Judy continued, "I didn't know what you were going to do. I knew you were doing something. I could see it in how you were standing. You looked like a man who'd already finished a sentence and was walking back to read it aloud." Dean smiled at that. "That's not a bad description." "The toilet." She shook her head slowly. "Of all things." "Dean, where did the toilet come from?" He thought about it. "There's something about the specificity of it," he said finally. "You couldn't just throw him out. Throwing him out makes him a martyr." He goes home and tells the story about the night Dean Martin had him ejected from the Coconut Grove, and somehow he's the interesting one. But you can't let him sit there like nothing happened. So you need something that isn't violent and isn't simple and isn't something he can spin into a story about himself that makes him look brave. "And cleaning toilets is inarguably humbling," Dean said. "And funny, it has to be a little funny. Cruelty without humor is just cruelty. But make it funny and proportional, and strange enough that the image sticks in people's minds." He shrugged. He'll spend the next 10 years at dinner parties with that story. And every time he tells it, every single time, he'll be the man who cleaned the bathrooms. There's no version of that story where he wins. Judy was quiet for a moment. That's somewhat diabolical. "I prefer efficient," Dean said. She laughed. A real one, full and surprised out of her. Gerald, the head of maintenance, was a man of few words and considerable dignity. He had seen extraordinary things in 16 years at the Ambassador Hotel. He had cleaned up after presidents and movie stars and criminals and royalty, and had treated every one of those situations with the same professional composure. He told exactly one person about the events of that evening. His wife, Eleanor, who told her sister, who worked in the commissary at Paramount Pictures. Within 6 weeks, the story had reached every major entertainment venue in Los Angeles. Within 3 months, it spread to New York, Chicago, and Las Vegas. Not the version with embellishments, though those existed, but the core of it, the essential architecture. A man had heckled Judy Garland, and Dean Martin had cut his microphone and made him clean the bathrooms. The effect was not subtle. There are stories that function as entertainment, and there are stories that function as policy. This one was both. You heard it, and you laughed, and you filed it somewhere that wasn't quite your humor center, and wasn't quite your fear center, but lived somewhere between them. A zone of clear understanding. A zone that said, certain behaviors carry certain consequences, and the consequences might be creative, and you will not see them coming, and you will never live them down. Richie Voss returned to the main room of the Coconut Grove 43 minutes after he left it. He was tidier than when he departed. His jacket was back on. His hair was combed. He had the expression of a man who had just completed a journey that had no map and had arrived somewhere he did not recognize, but could not deny. The show was still going. A stagehand led him to a spot in the back, near the service entrance, where he could stand and watch but not sit. He watched the last 40 minutes of Judy Garland performance from the back of the room. He never heckled anyone again. This is documented. It's a small documentation. He never became famous enough for his restraint to be widely noted. But people who worked with him in the years after smaller venues, club dates, a brief television appearance in 1964, they noted consistently that he was quiet in the audience. He sat. He watched. He clapped at the end. He told one interviewer in 1971, in a piece that ran in a small entertainment trade publication and was read by approximately 400 people, the following: I learned something in 1961 that I should have known before I ever set foot in a club. The audience isn't there for you. Even when you're the performer, even when your name is on a marquee, the audience isn't there for you. They're there for something that happens between all of you together. You're a vessel, not a destination. The moment you think you're more important than what's happening in the room, you've already lost. He paused in the interview. The interviewer noted that he seemed to be choosing his next words with unusual care. Someone showed me that once, in a fairly memorable way. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Dean Martin, for his part, did not discuss the evening extensively. He mentioned it once, in passing, at a dinner with Frank Sinatra and Peter Lawford sometime in the following spring. Frank had heard the story through channels and wanted confirmation. The toilet thing, Frank said, that was real. Gerald's a good man, Dean said. The facilities were spotless. Incidentally, he runs a tight operation. Frank stared at him. I'm serious, Dean said. You should see the tile work. Immaculate. Peter Lawford was laughing hard enough that he had to set down his fork. Dean, Frank said, why the toilet specifically? Dean considered this. He swirled whatever was in his glass. He looked out at whatever was in front of him, and he seemed to do a small calculation that wasn't quite math and wasn't quite philosophy, but lived somewhere between both. Because Judy Garland, he said slowly, spent 30 years cleaning up other people's messes. Professionally, personally. She cleaned up what the studios left behind. She cleaned up what her own health left behind. She rebuilt herself so many times that the rubble is permanent. She kept singing through things that would have destroyed anyone else. He paused. And some man who couldn't get his own show renewed thought he had the right to make a mess of her evening. He shook his head once. I just wanted him to understand what that feels like. From the hands and knees side of the equation, Frank Sinatra, who was not a sentimental man and was not a man given to displays of admiration, said nothing for several seconds. Then he raised his glass. No words, just the gesture, the acknowledgement. Dean raised his. Judy Garland performed at the Ambassador hotel twice more in the following 2 years. Both nights were extraordinary. Both nights were undisrupted. This was not entirely coincidental. The story lived ahead of her. It cleared the room of a certain kind of person before she arrived. People who might once have considered a comet, who might have felt that small, ugly pull towards saying something clever at a performer's expense, heard the story and filed it in that zone between humor and understanding. It's hard to quantify that kind of protection. You can't chart it. You can't point to the absence of something and say, this is what was prevented here, and here, and here. But it was real. It worked the way real things work. Not through announcement or declaration, but through demonstrated consequence. Dean Martin had not given a speech about how performers deserved respect. He had not written an open letter or convened a panel. He had cut a man's microphone and handed him a mop, and the specificity and the absurdity and the perfect calibration of that response had done more to protect the dignity of performers in Los Angeles entertainment venues than any speech could have. The thing about power, real power, is that it almost never announces itself. Loud men announce themselves. Men who are afraid they might go unnoticed make noise to prevent it. Men who need to prove that they matter find ways to demonstrate it loudly and frequently, and usually at someone else's expense. Dean Martin walked into a room, and the room changed. Not because anyone was afraid of him, not primarily, but because everyone in the room understood that he saw everything. He had cataloged the dynamics before the first drink was poured. He had already identified the person most likely to cause a problem. He had already made provisional arrangements. This was not calculation in the cold, mechanical sense. This was care. Dean Martin paid attention to rooms because he cared what happened in them. He cared about the performers. He cared about the audience. He cared in a way that was completely genuine and completely unsentimentalized about whether people got to experience what they came to experience without someone smaller and louder ruining it for them. That care, combined with the intelligence to act on it and the nerve to act on it publicly, was what made the evening of October 3rd, 1961, a story that people still told. It wasn't about embarrassment, though Richie Voss was certainly embarrassed. It wasn't about power, though Dean had certainly demonstrated it. It was about a simple underlying belief, held so firmly that it expressed itself without fanfare. Some people matter, and when someone tries to make them feel like they don't, the correct response is immediate, proportional, creative, and public. Judy Garland mattered. Dean Martin knew it. He showed the room, and the room remembered. In the spring of 1969, Judy Garland was performing a series of shows in London. She was in poor health. This was known, had been known for some time, and had made the shows both celebrated and complicated, the way things near the end often are. Dean called her before one of the performances. She picked up the phone on the fourth ring. She sounded tired but present. They talked for 11 minutes. About small things, mostly about mutual friends, about London weather, about a restaurant she discovered near her hotel that made a cream sauce she found implausible in its quality. At the end of the call, she said, "Dean, still here. The bathroom thing," she said. "I've been thinking about it lately. I don't know why. Lately, I think about strange things." "It was a good night," he said. "He looked so confused," she said, "when you first walked out. He couldn't figure out what was coming. You could see him trying to read the situation and just completely failing." A pause. Most people telegraph what they're going to do. Their body gives it away. You never telegraphed anything. "I'm a professional," Dean said. The smile was audible. She laughed. That real laugh. The full one. "Thank you," she said, "for that night, for picking up the phone tonight, for being," she paused, searching, "for being consistent. There are very few consistent people in this business. Very few people who are exactly who they appear to be. You always were." "Go sing," Dean said gently. "I will." "Judy." "Yes." "You're worth the whole room," he said. "You always were. Make sure they know it tonight." She was quiet for a moment. "I will," she said again. But the second time it sounded different. It sounded like she meant it. Judy Garland died 2 months later, at her memorial service in New York. The tributes came from every corner of a life and a career that had been lived in front of the world for 40 years. People spoke about her voice, about her courage, about the particular alchemy that happened when she stood at a microphone and opened her mouth, and the sound that came out of her reached something in the listener that they hadn't known was reachable. Dean Martin did not speak at the service. He sat in the third row. He wore a dark suit. He was still. The people around him who expected the relaxed, loose-limbed ease that defined his public image were surprised by what they found instead. A man who was present completely without performance, without artifice. He sat with a grief the way you sit with something real. He didn't try to make it smaller. Afterward, at the reception, a journalist who'd covered the entertainment industry for 20 years found himself standing near Dean Martin near a window. He'd heard the story of the Coconut Grove. He'd been wanting for years to ask Dean directly about it. He gathered himself and he asked. Dean was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window. "She had the best voice I ever heard," he said. "Not technically. Technically, there might have been others. But for what a voice is actually for communicating something true from one person to another person across a room, across a whole lifetime of distance," he shook his head. Nobody came close. And the night at the Grove, the journalist pressed gently. Dean turned to look at him. His eyes were clear. They were always clear. "Some things are worth protecting," Dean said simply. "Not everyone understands which things. But when you're standing in a room and you know, not think, know, that something beautiful is happening, something rare and real and worth a whole evening," he paused. "You protect it. That's the whole story. You protect it, whatever it costs, whatever it takes." He excused himself. He walked back into the room. The journalist stood at the window for a long time after that. He filed a story the following week that tried to capture the evening and the conversation. He revised the ending 11 times. He finally left it with the thing Dean had said verbatim and then let it end there because there was nothing to add that would make it better, and he was professional enough to know when something needed no improvement. Some things are worth protecting, whatever it costs, whatever it takes. The evening of October 3rd, 1961, at the Coconut Grove is remembered not for the disruption that tried to define it, but for the response that refused to let it. Dean Martin walked onto that stage without an invitation and without a script, and what he did there wasn't complicated. He simply made it clear, in the most specific and public and unforgettable terms available to him, that Judy Garland was not an object to be commented upon. She was not a catalog of well-known troubles. She was not a reference to be deployed for cheap effect by a man trying to fill the room with himself. She was a person, and she was extraordinary, and she was standing 3 feet from a microphone that she had earned the right to stand at, and she was giving everything she had, and that deserved the whole room. Its silence, its attention, its absolute presence in return. Dean Martin didn't just shut down a heckler that night. He established, with the most elegant and absurd and perfectly calibrated consequence imaginable, what the room owed the stage, and what the stage, when it belongs to someone genuinely rare, is worth protecting at any cost. The mop was already in the closet. All it took was someone willing to hand it over.